Okay, looks like it's up. So take it away, guys.
Good morning, sir and students. Today, my teammates, along with myself, will be presenting on Chapter 6, Integrity and Moral Purpose. So, last class, we had two lovely presentations on Chapter 4, Understanding Self, and Chapter 5, Understanding Others. Now, this chapter is divided into the following subtopics as seen in the book, such as the introduction, chapter overview, creating a sustaining and ethical organizational environment, moral purpose as an act of courage, assumptions about ethical leadership, cultural assumptions, ethical theories and moral purpose, transforming leadership theory, modeling a moral purpose, moral talk, ethical decision making models, practical applications, ethical principles and standards, and the conclusion. So now I would like to hand you over to Olivia.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, fellow students. We are discussing Chapter 6, Leading with Integrity and Moral Purpose. And such a leader or leaders or these types of leaders are capable or able to deal with ethical dilemmas by engaging others who are directly affected by that particular situation or all members of their team or organization. So we will be discussing at least 3 pointers today. We're looking out for 3 pointers. And one, how to create and sustain an ethical environment. Two, how to analyze moral dimensions of transforming leadership theory. And three, an examination of the ethical influences that participants, that being the team, others in the organization, have on their organizational behavior modeling. So why should a leader consider these things? Why should a leader consider being or dealing with ethical dilemmas? In this chapter or the beginning of the chapter, there are 3 scenarios that were presented. Looking at the third scenario, we talk about a situation where somebody is collecting funds for a philanthropy research. And then the leader is looking on and notices that someone is taking money to buy beer at the end of the day after soliciting the taking from the donation money for personal refreshment. What would a leader like that do? Well, that that leader or a leader who is operating or dealing with integrity and moral purpose is not going to react quickly and just deal with the matter just like that. Neither will they pretend that they didn't notice. Such a leader would want to consider what the um, chapter highlights for us. They'd want to consider the rational leadership model. And that model indicates that a leader should be inclusive. They should involve the people or the group. They should follow a process by gathering information. They should encourage conversation among the team. And they should consider what are the boundaries, what are the laws, what determines the morals or the values or the principles that should be considered when dealing with a particular ethical dilemma. So an ethical dilemma, I neglected to say, an ethical dilemma could be defined as any situation that is just wrong or may be considered wrong in the society or in the environment that we may be living in or operating in. Sorry. It is wrong in the sense that it is not having a positive impact on the overall objective of the team or the organization. So a leader is going to, this particular leader, this type of leader is going to consider relational leadership in dealing with ethical dilemmas. Um, I had an example also, something a little more common. A leader will face ethical dilemmas, and this example I had is of a supporting PTA person or PTA president. You just get elected as a PTA president, and you're being updated, and you realize that the norm or the practice within the PTA executive is that they would pay the executive members, they would pay parents who may volunteer, quote and unquote volunteer because they're being paid, to do or to support different tasks or different situations on the PTA board or within the school. Once the person does a job, they are being paid for it. So what would an ethical leader do? So it is ethical dilemmas like these that test leadership success. The leader would want to not react too quickly to resolve them, and they would not want to pretend either. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. So in this chapter, we'll be reviewing the rational leadership model and explore how leaders can use its principles in leading with integrity and morals that are beneficial for the leader and the participants alike. Next slide. In her 1990 book, Good Intentions, and I'm reading from the book, the textbook. In her 1990 book, Good Intentions Aside, A Manager's Guide to Resolving Ethical Problems, Laura Nash discusses various ethical dilemmas faced by managers, even when faced with seemingly good intentions that could lead to problematic outcomes. Nash purposes 4 qualities that are necessary for participants to advance ethical standards in an organization. 1 is critical thinking skills to analyze and convey the ethical components of a problem or a dilemma. They have to be able to take the issue apart and recognize how each individual could be affected, is affected, or why, or to understand why the person might, or an individual or a situation might occur. The second, a high degree of integrity to stand up for personal or professional ethics. So a leader have to be able to stand their ground, so to speak. They have to have clear ethics, and they have to be sound integrity. So they have to be able to stand up. They can't just bend under pressure. Third, the ability to see situations from others' perspective. So it can't be just their thoughts. You have to be able to understand why a person, like I said before, why a person may think the way they think, or why a person may have operated the way they have operated. What factors influence their thoughts? What factors influence their reactions? And fourth, that leader has personal motivation to do the right thing. So they have to, again, be courageous. They have to be able to be strong, motivated. They have to want to do the right thing. Who or what determines what is the right thing, though? Next slide. So Nash's idea of having personal courage is of utmost importance when trying to make the right decision for the good of the organization in the face of opposition from the membership. So, for example, an individual might, or a leader will decide on certain morals, or they may see a certain situation. It may be the norm, it may be something being practiced, nobody frowned on it before, but they recognize that a decision has to be made and maybe some principles has to be adjusted or put in force or to be enforced. But not everybody on the team may agree, even if it is discussed, and not everyone will be able to agree. However, that leader has to be able to receive criticism. They have to be strong enough to stand up, even if persons might revolt or if persons might not support them. So the paragraph or the chapter makes the point that sometimes it might not even be economical for the person to take the decision or the moral decision that they're making. It might even cost them a few dollars and cents. However, the idea is to have personal courage. That leader have to have courage in order for them to do the right thing, because the right thing may not always be economical, but they must be able to face that. They must be able to guide and direct so that each person on the team will be able to understand. They may not agree, but they may clearly understand why the decision is being made and what benefits overall it will bring to the organization. All participants, positional leaders, and members alike should be equally empowered to set a tone in the organization. So even if you might be leading and you have to stand your ground, still, such a leader will take into consideration the opinions, the suggestions, have conversations with others so that it will set a tone in the organizational climate that will foster and support ethical and moral actions and sensitivity. The group, the group has to have a common purpose. The driving force is for identifying the values. So that leader have to be able to set that before the group. They must stick with it and also be able to give clear directives or clear explanations, like I said before, as to why this would be the best way to proceed, and persons must still be able to give their comments or reviews even if they may not agree. However, the leader is going to establish core values that each member should abide by. The results of that could be, one, working in an environment where everybody works in unison. So everybody know what is expected of them. They understand why certain values or morals should be followed. Everybody have that same common goal set before them. And two, you can hold another person into account because the values, the principles, the morals, it's clear, it's there. Everyone is aware of it. So if somebody falls short, persons can be held accountable in discussing those matters, those ethical matters openly. Next slide. It would not be nice, or it might cause more conflict to appoint one person to be the group's ethic and standard bearer. So one person to say, this is right, this is wrong, and this is where we are going. Nobody else has a say, nobody else could contribute. It would not achieve the same ethical climate as when all participants are concerned with doing what is right. In fact, it may be counterproductive for a leader to handle ethical dilemmas alone or in isolation from other members of the organization. Now, there were two studies, one by Keller and one by Lipman Blumen, and they addressed the notion of bad or toxic leaders and their resulting consequences. Now, Kellerman categorized two types of bad leadership. One bad as an ineffective leader and bad as in an unethical leader. Now, ideally, leaders and followers are effective and ethical as they work to achieve a shared vision or common agenda. But Kellerman described bad as in ineffective leaders as a leader who may, a certain goal or objective may be handed down to that leader. The organization has to improve, maybe in the way in which they handle clients, how they accept funds, or how sales are done, something like that. And that leader may deal with those things in a very straight up way. It's open, it's clear, and it's fair to everyone, both the leader, the organization, and the people who they interact with. However, because that person may not be doing anything, they're not cutting corners, so to speak. They may not be able to achieve the goal on time or within the time that is given to them. So they may be ineffective because they didn't get to accomplish the goal. However, there's the other type of leader, which is bad as in unethical, because that leader now, the goal will be accomplished, but how they accomplish that goal, what corners did they cut, what underhanded things did they do? So that in itself, either way is a bad leader, but the objective of how you come to your goal will determine um, the morals, the ethics, the values by which the company is built or can grow on. Lipman describes toxic leaders as those who engage in numerous destructive behaviors and exhibit certain dysfunctional personal characteristics. Um, Next slide. And for them to count as toxic, these behaviors, it's these behaviors and qualities may it inflicts serious and enduring harm to their followers and their organization. So sometimes that's a leader who might be disrespectful. They will shout at employees or those below them or their followers. They will speak down to them. They will not take into consideration how they feel about anything, whether it's on the job. They will not take into account what is happening. They don't care, and they don't allow their followers or their team members to feel part or empowered or a part of what is happening in the organization or a part of the goals that they have set. These types of leaders that Lipman Blumen speak about are leaders who don't care about others. So here are a few examples of behaviors and traits associated with toxic leaders. They leave their followers worse off than they found them. They violate the basic standards of human rights of their own supporters as well as those of other individuals and groups. They do not count among their followers. Consciously, they consciously feed their followers illusions that enhance the leader's power and impair the followers' capacity to act independently. So, for example, they are persuading followers that the leader is the only one who can save them in the organization. So they don't make people feel a part of anything. They manipulate, they play on the fears and the needs of their followers, they mislead their followers. They have enormous egos. They are reckless for the cost of their actions to others as well as themselves. So they do whatever they want. Quite frankly, I would not just say that these types of leaders are toxic. Some of them are even, I would say, con artists, so to speak. But what is rewarded and recognized often teaches others about what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior within an organization. So we have a leader who is toxic, or um, how would that be dealt with? Or even if it's not just the leaders, but members doing underhand things, how would that be dealt with? Should it be ignored? Should it be addressed through conversation? And that is going back to the relational leadership model. A leader who is leading with integrity would look at all those factors, whether it's the toxic part, whether it's the con artist part, where the organization, where the members are doing underhand things. And they would try, a good leader, a leader who is leading with moral and ethics, would want to understand how these things are happening. They would approach this issue from different perspectives. Um, they would still be respectful, but they would try to gather information on what are the boundaries, what laws, or what principles, or what code of conduct, what law book is guiding or should be guiding individuals who are acting in such a way. And they would try to have balance, equity. They would try to get persons involved. So it means that they would try to connect, they would try to see the issues and the problem, not through tunnel vision, but they would try to have a broad view on it. They would try um, to deal with it in a very well, I do inclusive way, get persons involved, have conversations, have meetings, hear what the person on the ground is saying, and then they would try to implement um, strategies, policies. They would try to put things in place because they would need to establish common values, common ethics that persons ought to live up to or work with in order to lift the organization in a positive light. They would also try to create awards. So once a leader who is leading with ethics and morals, one of the good practices would be to create awards that would recognize members and other leaders in um, positional leaders, would help them to maintain the ethical environment, reward their good work. So a person may accomplish different goals or so, and they did it well, they did it according to policy, they didn't cut corners, they did. Hi, sir, you all hearing me?
Yeah, we have you.
Hello? Okay, because the service just dropped a bit. Sorry about that. I got disconnected. Right. So it would be an excellent thing to really reward persons publicly, those who promote ethical behavior. And that in itself would encourage all the others in the organization to maintain the principles and values and ethics within the organization. Um, it will also be good to hold persons accountable, those who are not living up to the values and principles set, to hold them accountable. But that in itself has to be handled carefully because we also a leader who is leading with ethics and values still don't want to demean anybody in public. They don't want to embarrass them. That kind of demeaning way or insulting way. So it has to be dealt with persons who may have violated the laws or the ethical standards. You would still have to deal with that in a very I don't want to use the word calm, but I can't think of anything else right now, but in a very dignified, that's the word, in a dignified way. But persons who are violators of the standards, the ethical standards of the organization should be made or should be held accountable. Some organization, next slide. Next slide, please. Am I frozen? Jams? Okay, here we go. All right. Now, in the real world, we know that not everyone operates in an ethical manner. And some leaders may turn a blind eye because at the end of the day, they getting the job done. So if the participants or even they as themselves, they are like quarrel or cuss or carry on, because I want to give an example here where sometimes there might be persons who are in a position and we're talking about having a positive ethical environment. So the leaders and the participants may not be, or somebody is interfering with the flow of positive or upholding the principles. And there's an example that I have in mind. It's something I recognize within an organization that I once dealt with. There's a colleague or an employee, and that person is not fully qualified for the job. But they are in a position, so to speak, they get the results done, they meet the goals, they get it done, they get the work done, or they meet the objective, but the road or the means by which they do it, it is causing issues at the end of it. It is causing losses at the end of it. So this colleague, they might be able, there's a task to do, a project to finish, and they may be able to get the material there. They may be able to get, see, this is a construction company. So they'll be able to order, they manage the project and so on, get the materials to where it's supposed to be and so on and so forth. But they have difficulty in communicating well with their team leaders. They have difficulty putting together the documents to get bills paid, and they will neglect to file properly. They would not do proper transfers. They would, create files that are not accurate. And in the end, reports that can't be done properly. You have, when they are spoken to about it, that particular employee is rude. The supervisor doesn't want to deal with it because at the end of the day, the job done and it's done well enough, but they have problems with fellow team members, they are disrespectful, they cussing people out, stuff like that. And even when they interact with partnering companies, they are unprofessional, they speak down to the people, they may not take calls. So that is the scenario. But the leader is not engaging the situation. They're not holding conversations. They're not trying to understand why the person is doing what they're doing. They're not looking at how it is impacting others on the team. And so, in the end, the organization is at a cost, both in terms of their reputation and in terms of their actual, well, the income. And the supervisor may, like in this situation, turn a blind eye because the end result or the anticipated result is attained. So organization like that, the team will lack a positive, there is a lack of positive ethical, you could say the environment doesn't have much positive effect in it. Me again, oh, I thought I'd get cut off. Now, integrity is connected with respect. And without integrity, you cannot gain the respect of your fellow members. And without that respect, organization goals are not attained. Now, the situation I spoke of a while ago, certain things have been attained, the job was done, the project was completed, and so on. But you have the monetary factor now, or you may have the reporting factor, and you have the factor that the staff themselves are not motivated because you have so much contention among the group, and the leader is not leading by dealing with these matters in an ethical way. They are not upholding company policies where persons ought to give certain reports, speak respectfully. The leader is not ensuring that that is happening. And I would say that is an example of someone or a leader who is ineffective. They may attain the end result, might work out, but the way in which it has been accomplished is not ethical at all. I'm quoting from the book again. Melissa Sholitera, an accountant major at Kent University, president of Students of Scholarship and a member of Beta Alpha PSI Accounting Honoree. Well, she quoted by saying that integrity and respect is connected. And that is so true because leaders are the most visible people in the organization. Their actions and values reflect on all those who are involved. So if the leaders and the participants or those under them cannot behave in a way that upholds the integrity that is defined by the policies of the organization, then their respect will dwindle among the leaders' respect will dwindle among the other members on the team, the participants, their followers, the respect for them will diminish. And also other businesses that they deal with, because of the way in which they deal with things, approach things, the way they deal with people, they too, they would also lose respect for that organization. Next slide. A leader whose aim is to lead with integrity struggles daily to maintain ethical fitness and express moral courage. Individuals committed to leading with integrity face their own dilemma of what to do when their values and principles clash with the organizational standards. This is why this is a very difficult situation, and it offers only three choices. So the leader could choose to ignore or put up with the situation, leave it as it is, how it hang it swing, or they could address the situation according to the relational leadership model, and they can work to change the climate of the organization, or they may just leave the organization on a whole. So a leader will struggle with such a decision every day, but being ethically fit means being mentally engaged, thinking about the dilemma you are facing within the company in which you are working or within the organization in which you're operating, reasoning through it and grappling with the tough issues. All of this requires practice, thinking through potential ethical dilemmas, so you or the leader can use this to process when you actually face a dilemma. So, what kind of leader will be ethically fit? A leader who is willing to understand how different groups or individuals might approach an issue, and an individual who will put themselves in other people's shoes, so to speak. They will try to understand why an individual may or individuals may be operating how they are operating, and they will make every effort to have discussions and then present very clearly what the goals are, what the principles in which the organization ought to operate on, and they will also be able to enforce it. Enforcing it means they will reward persons who have upheld those ethical principles and values that were set in place. They will also be able to stand their ground when they face criticism, or the most of the crowd don't agree with them, and they will also um, be respectful in dealing with all individuals, even when an individual may have to be held accountable for their inability to uphold the principles and organization that has been set. A leader who leads with integrity and morals will make sure that they will be prepared. They will make sure that they have courage in order for them to deal with that. But most importantly, when the values or the principles are set in place, they ensure that everybody understands, and they will reward good and also hold people accountable for actions that they did not uphold. Next slide. Okay. This concludes my section or my delivery of this part of the chapter. And now we will listen to Selena as she continues on moral purpose as an act of courage.
Good morning, everyone. Moving on to moral purpose as an act of courage. Moral courage involves standing by ethical principles, despite risk and adversity. It consists of three key elements: principles, danger, and endurance. This chapter illustrates moral leadership using both historical and modern examples of people who have shown moral courage. These are the examples. Nelson Mandela endured 18 years of imprisonment for opposing upright, demonstrating his commitment to justice despite personal sacrifices. Sharon Watkins, Iran whistleblower, exposed corporate fraud, risking her career for ethical accountability. Some of the key takeaways are Ethical leadership demands sacrifices such as job losses or social exclusion. And a true leader integrate moral courage into decision making and inspire others through ethical behavior. I would now pass on to Jamila.
Hi guys, it's me again. So on to assumptions about ethical leadership. So there are several myths and misunderstandings about what good leadership is, which is both effective and ethical. Today we will be looking at the 8 assumptions proposed by Lucas and Anelio about ethical leadership. So firstly, we have ethics is the heart of leadership. So ethics is the central key to leadership. Therefore, true leadership is just not about achieving goals, but also about following an ethical process. Good leadership is both effective and principled, where integrity ensures that the means justify the ends. Secondly, leadership is value driven. Leadership is always value driven. Ethical leaders always prioritize fairness, respect, and integrity. These leaders are the ones who bring their values to the organization, whether it's right or wrong. On the other hand, organizations are never value neutral, so leaders must reflect those ethical principles to foster justice, equity, and positive impact. Thirdly, personal values intersect with organizational values. In order to become an ethical leader, you have to know your own personal values and align them with your organization's values. Your moral compass helps navigate ethical dilemmas by considering different viewpoints and making decisions based on an ethical analysis and integrity. Fourthly, ethical leadership can be learned. Ethical leadership is a learned through experience, reflection, and application. Trial and error improve ethical judgment, and life experiences shape your moral development, helping you make just and fair decisions before taking action. Fifth, ethical leadership involves a connection between ethical thoughts and action. Ethical leadership connects moral reasoning, values, and actions. It's not about memorizing theories, but applying ethical concepts to real life situations with thoughtful decision making and leadership integrity. Six, character development is an essential ingredient of ethical leadership. Leaders must align their actions with their values. A leader's character is judged by behavior, not words. Therefore, without integrity, popularity won't earn respect, as they say leaders must walk their talk. 7. Ethical leadership is a shared process. So, ethical leadership is a shared responsibility, not just the leaders, but for all members as well. So, everybody must uphold core values, make ethical choices, and advocate for what's right, even when facing risk. Inclusive organizations engage members in ethical decision making and seek their advice on how to resolve problems without the organization, whether it's with customers or how to boost sales, etc. And lastly, everything we do teaches. So role modeling shapes the ethical climate in organization, communities, and even families. When leaders demonstrate discriminatory behavior, others may follow suit because we learn by watching others. Controversially, when leaders prioritize diversity, such as increasing minority representation, it sets a positive example that others are likely to adopt. So, overall, leading with moral purpose requires self reflection on ethical assumptions, leadership qualities, and the balance between personal values and organizational goals. It's about engaging in ethical analysis, using moral imagination to address dilemmas, and being willing to risk advancing justice, fairness, and core values, even when faced with tough decisions or contradictions. I would hand you back over to Selena. My bad, my bad. So, on to cultural assumption. Ethics also exists in cultural settings, and there is no universal agreement as to what's considered culture appropriate. So, what's ethical in one society may be unethical in another. For example, the gender discrimination against women in Saudi riba, which is considered legal, ethical, and moral, versus United States, which is considered unethical, illegal, and immoral. So ethics are also temporal, changing with evolving laws and social norms. So things like the segregation practices of the blacks and the whites, which were considered ethical before the 1960s, are no longer ethical and legal today. So these laws and regulations play a significant role in shaping and altering ethical practices, especially in the business sector. Furthermore, some may argue that they are universal values such as truth, goodness, courage, and justice, which are found across all cultures. Although their application may differ, an interview with several different leaders from various countries was conducted. And Kindler in 2005 identified 8 common values among global leaders such as love, truthfulness, fairness, freedom, unity, tolerance, responsibility, and respect for life, while Seligman in 2002 identified 6 virtues common across religious and philo- pathological traditions such as wisdom and knowledge, courage, love and humanity, justice, temperance, and spirituality. So, with that being said, while cultures may differ these virtues differently, their core ideals remain similar worldwide. On another note, anthropological studies showed that moral views differ between cultures and within the same culture. So concept of right and wrong, justice and injustice are shaped by cultural values and attitudes. So let's look at this example. American women believe that Muslim women that wear veils constitute sexist behavior and practice. This may be culturally acceptable and normal in Iran, but can be somewhat unacceptable in America because this is not the cultural norm there. Carrying on, cultural tolerance is the recognition of differences in practices without trying to change them to fit one's cultural beliefs and cultural relativism. Focuses on understanding, not judging, practices within specific cultures or communities. The overall goal is for us to understand the different cultural norms and not judge them for if it's good or bad. Moreover, corruption varies across cultures with different tolerance levels to occurrence rates in different countries. So, for instance, the Corruption Perceptions Index in 2001 ranks countries from 1 to 10 based on business perceptions of corruption. So, examples of this may include parents bribing teachers to receive educational benefits or special treatment for their child, or even large amounts of public funds being wasted or stolen by public officials. Additionally, in 2001, 56 out of 91 countries scored below 5.0, Finland with a 9.9, and Denmark with a 9.5, were the least corrupt, and the US scored 7.6. In 2003, the index ranked 146 countries. 60 scored below 3, with countries like Brazil and Cuba among the lowest. Lastly, in 2003, the Transparency International and Gallup conducted the Global Corruption Barometer to assess public perceptions of corruption. When people were asked to rate which sectors they believe were the most corrupt in their countries, were political parties, followed by parliament, police, and the legal system. So I have a question here. So why do you think the political parties, police, and legal system is considered the most corrupt worldwide and locally? So you could either respond via chat or you could unmute your mic. Anybody? So nobody don't want to answer? All right, so I'll be handing you back to Selena for ethical theories and moral purpose.
Ethical theories and moral purposes. Ethical theories provide frameworks for moral decision making in leadership. These theories serve to guide leaders and people on decisions regarding right and wrong according to different philosophical viewpoints. These are some of the theories. Next slide, please. Some of the theories are duty-based ethics. Immanuel Kant's principle that moral rules must be followed regardless of outcomes. Utilitarianism, proposed by John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham, prioritizing the greatest good for the majority. Virtue ethics, based on Aristotle's philosophy emphasizing personal character and integrity. Lastly, transformational leadership theory, developed by James McGregor Burns, advocating leaders who evaluate followers through ethical motivation. For example, a leader who prioritizes justice, fairness, and equality inspires followers to adopt these values. Next slide, please. Moving on to transformational leadership theory. Transformational leadership uplifts both leaders and followers by fostering ethical values, motivation, and social responsibility. Some of the key components are leaders inspire with ideas like justice and equality. Power is used for collective good, not personal gain. And lastly, followers and leaders influence each other positively. For example, Mahatma Gandhi led nonviolent resistance against British colonial rule. Martin Luther King Jr. advocated for civil rights through moral leadership. Mother Teresa dedicated her life to humanity work. Some contrast with transitional leadership are transactional leadership relies on rewards and penalties, and transformational leadership is rooted in ethics and vision-driven motivation. Next slide, please. Next slide, I guess. Moving on to modeling a moral purpose. A leader's moral purpose shapes their decisions, builds trust, and strengthens organization culture. Some are the key points are ethical leaders demonstrate moral integrity, accountability, and persuasion through actions, and trust and credibility. Again, through consistent ethical behavior, ethical leadership influences work culture and employee behavior. Next slide, please. An example of this is a school principal who values inclusivity, ensures policies support students from diverse backgrounds. Moving on to moral talk. Moral talk refers to open discussions on ethical dilemmas within organizations, fostering a culture of ethical awareness and joint decision making. Next slide. Some of the key points are Leaders set the tone for ethical decisions by modeling moral conversations. Encouraging ethical debates prevents moral mutism, ignoring ethical issues. And group responsibility ensures that ethical control is shared among all members and not just leaders. For example, a student government leader introduced the game Scribbles at retreat to provoke discussions on moral dilemmas, enhancing ethical awareness among members. I would now be handing over back to Jamila.
So on to ethical decision-making models. So first we have the leadership process involves daily ethical dilemmas that require collective resolution. It's not just the leader's responsibility to address ethical issues. Both leaders and participants should be involved. So the rational leadership model emphasizes inclusive, process-oriented leadership to achieve the results for the common good. Leaders and participants should be reflective, challenging, caring, purposeful, and consultative when facing ethical challenges. Secondly, there are several ways to approach ethical dilemmas, and sometimes it can be resolved using professional codes of conduct, such as lawyers and physicians. Religious and counseling professionals prioritize confidentiality, except when harm is involved, and campus policies like sexual harassment and non discrimination also guide behavior. Fraternities, sororities, and student governments follow rituals, honor codes, and constitutions to uphold standards and guide decision making. Furthermore, ethics like leadership is complex and not always straightforward. Not all situations can be solved by professional codes or organizational standards. Some ethical dilemmas require human judgment and analysis to identify, as they may sometimes be misinterpreted, for example, a personality conflict instead of an ethical issue. And lastly, ethical decision making models are practical tools for resolving dilemmas. Leaders and participants should use these models collaboratively, not rigidly. Some models require careful analysis, reflection, and consideration of various factors. Thus, using moral imagination is key to finding new solutions to unsolved problems. So now we on to practical applications, and we have a scenario here. So imagine you're in a college which has a strict academic honor code, calling for community members to turn in anyone who violates the code. So you're the president of the interfraternity council. During an exam, you notice your fellow fraternity brother, who is also one of your best friends, cheating from another classmate. How do you go about confronting this situation? One, do you follow the code and turn your fraternity brother into the judicial office? Two, do you try and after the exam to persuade him not to cheat in the exam in the future because you will have to turn him in and it would look bad for the fraternity? Three, do you begin to initiate a decision making process that will guide you from the stage of interpreting the situation? Four, or the final stage of acting with your convictions and moral purpose in mind? Or do you do nothing without acting with a moral purpose? So anybody want to try and get my answer for this scenario? Like what you'll do in this situation?
I would say I would do number two, answer number two.
Why you'll do number two?
I know it's wrong to cheat, right? But next thing you know, he had some issues or she had some issues at the home. They couldn't get to study this and that, and that was the chance. I would let them take the chance, but I would let them know after that is not the good thing to do. And in the future, I might as well help them study or whatever.
Right, right. Anybody else want to answer? All right, moving on. So, the ethical decision making models help individuals navigate moral dilemmas with purpose by providing structured frameworks to analyze situations before making decisions instead of reacting impulsively. These models encourage thoughtful evaluation to make sound decisions. So, Kidner definition of tough choices is those that pit one right value against another. So, for example, like honesty versus loyalty, telling the truth versus protecting a friend, these decisions become more difficult when both choices align with moral principles. Now we would examine Kinder's four dilemma paradigm, the common types of right versus right dilemmas. So first we have justice versus mercy. This is fairness and equity conflict with compassion, empathy, and love. Second, we have short term versus long term. Immediate needs run counter to future goals. Third, we have individual versus community. So self versus others or small group versus larger groups. And fourth, we have truth versus loyalty. Honesty competes with commitment, responsibility, or promise keeping. So I have another question here. So this is the case of Terry Scivio in 2005. So for background info, we have Terry collapsed in her home and remained in a persistent vegetative state for 15 years. Right, a legal battle arose between her husband who wanted to remove her life support and her parents who wanted to keep her alive. The question values are justice, the legal rights and process, and two, mercy, compassion, and sanity of life. So the question is, with all of that, the Terry case, should life support be removed if a patient cannot express their wishes, and who should decide? Y'all think the parents or the husband should decide for Terry? No need to rush, guys. Take your time.
I would say I'm not sure who should actually decide because at the same time, um, when you're just there in a vegetative state, you I don't think anybody would like to be like that. So it's at that point in time, I think you should just let them go. But at the same time, keeping them alive, I don't know if she might like come out that state, but I doubt she will. So I think you should just let her go.
Yeah, because the 15 years did pass. All right, thank you. So I'll be going on. So ethical dilemmas occur when values conflict, requiring difficult choices. So the truth versus loyalty dilemma happens when honesty clashes with personal loyalty. So we have an example here. David Kavinsky, who turned in his brother Theodore de Unabama despite emotional agony, prioritizing truth over family loyalty. This is a prime example of someone who is brave despite being blood. He made a difficult decision to give up his brother because he committed the crime of mailing bombs, killing or injuring innocent lives. Now we will discuss the three principles by Kidner for ethical decision making. One, ends-based thinking. Best known as the maxim, do whatever produces the greatest good for the greatest number. This involves cost benefit analysis to determine who benefits and who suffers and mainly focuses on consequences and outcomes. Two, rule-based thinking. This follows a rule that should be universal for everyone. It emphasizes duty, moral obligation, and consistency. This rule-based thinking is based firmly on duty, like what we ought to do instead of what we think would work. Like ask yourself, what would happen if everyone acted this way? Three, care-based thinking, the golden rule. This is putting love for others first. Do to others what you would want them to do to you. It focuses on empathy and compassion and requires you to consider the impact of actions on others. So we have the last scenario here for practical applications. So you're the president of the college Young Democrats Club. Your group has discovered that an unflattering article about the club will be printed in the next day's campus newspaper. Club members begin planning a scheme to steal all the newspapers before students get them in the morning. So now using the examples of ethical decision making models, how would you approach a situation? What are the moral decisions of this situation? Is it a violation of a constitutional right to freedom of the press or a violation of the school's honor code? So what we have, would you convince members not to execute their plan because they might get caught and the club might lose its charter? Two, or would you threaten to turn them in if they proceed? Or three, would you urge them not to do this because it is wrong to steal these papers and an obstruction of the constitutional right of freedom of the press? So which one y'all would do out of the three answers that out there? Anybody want to answer? All right, moving on to the last subtopic. So we have ethical principles and standards. So Aristotle's ethical philosophy serves as the foundation of living an ethical life or standard to guide professionals in medicine, psychology, and counseling. B. Chairman Childress in 1979 developed five principles of biomedical ethics, later adopted by Karen Strom Kitchener for counseling psychology. These five principles are respecting autonomy. Leaders and members have the freedom of choice but within reasonable limits. Individuals should be allowed to develop their own values and act independently. Competence is key. One must have the ability to make rational and informed decisions. So, an example is a leader allows team members to choose their work methods as long as they align with the organization's goals. Two, doing no harm. Leaders and members must ensure a safe environment, both psychology and physical. Actions and that could cause harm to others should be avoided. Ethical leadership requires careful decision making to prevent harm. So, example is a manager refrains from making harsh public criticisms of employees to protect their mental well being. Three, benefiting others. The organization's interests come before personal interest or self gain. Leaders should promote the well being and growth of the group. Ethical leadership ensures decisions benefit the collective rather than an individual. So, an example is a business leader prioritizes fair wages and employee welfare over increasing personal profits. Four, being just. There must be fair and equal treatment of all individuals, regardless of status. Aristotle's ethics emphasize justice as a key moral principle, which leaders should ensure no favoritism or discrimination occurs. So, an example is a teacher grades students solely based on performance rather than personal bias. And lastly, we have being faithful. Keeping promises, commitments, and trust within the group can build trust between leaders and members. Breaking this fidelity leads to distrust, making leadership ineffective. So an example is a coach promises to support their team and follows through, creating a trusting environment. So we have a scenario here. You're the chair of the homecoming committee and you discover that the promotions subcommittee designed a t-shirt with offensive imagery or text directed at certain ethnic groups. The committee has already spent $10,000 on the shirts, which must be recovered through sales. You must decide how to handle this issue while balancing ethical principles. So, which of the five ethical principles would you use? Anybody want to answer? Or y'all forgot the 5 principles already? Nobody? All right. So furthermore, professional codes of ethics is a set of guidelines and principles that govern ethical behavior in a profession, which ensures integrity, accountability, and ethical decision making. These guides for decision making help professionals make ethical choices in difficult situations while reducing the risk of corruption, fraud, or misconduct. It also establishes common values and ethical expectations, as well as helping these professions maintain credibility and confidence in their job. A couple examples of professions with ethical codes are law, the American Bar Association, ABA, Model Rules of Professional Conduct, journalism, the Society of Professional Journalists, SPJ, Code of Ethics, and three, government and politics, ethical guidelines of public service and conflict of interest policies. Another decision-making model is the newspaper's test. So think about this before you make a move or decision, right? Whether or not you're comfortable with your action, would you be okay with this decision appearing in the newspapers? Do you think you would pass the test? Overall, these ethical decision-making models are here to assist you with making better informed and careful analyzed decisions before taking actions. Many times we may be provoked to make hasty decisions, which, when we think about it later on, may not have been the correct action to take. These models may not necessarily aid you in every dilemma you come across, but it provides you with the framework you need to help make these important decisions. So, to conclude everything, leading with integrity is a continuous process involving moral development, role models, and values driven leadership. It requires raising ethical questions, empowering others, and collaboratively resolving dilemmas. Ethical leadership, especially in today's fast paced world, is crucial for building trust and positively impacting society. Striving to create ethical environments and rewarding moral actions help foster ethical decision making and collaboration. So, thank you everyone for listening to our presentation.